Hello, Thursday. This is Europe going back to the start of the century, start of the euro, the start of things. At the bottom is Germany. Now what we're looking at here is unit labour costs across the euro area. What Germany did was have a governmental and union pact where the unions were not to demand wage rises and the government would make sure jobs arrived. This all happened. So unit labour costs are low in Germany. This has led in Germany to low internal consumption. Okay. And stuff like that. The rest of the people are the rest of the people in Europe. The grey one that went all the way up and has dropped down is Greece. And those are Greece's unit labour costs that were high, very high for what they got up to, and they've dropped now down to Germany. But it doesn't mean they can compete with Germany. Of course they can't compete with Germany because they don't have what it takes to compete with Germany. And all the others are well above Germany. They can't compete with Germany either. And just like Greece, even if their unit labour costs drop down to German ones, they still couldn't compete with Germany. But you see, Ireland, another of the early ones into austerity, have come down to a great extent as well. They only compete with Germany on their English language and tax advantages, not in production. Right, that's the setup. Move on. Gap between rich and poor grows in Germany. More than half of Germany's privately owned assets are held by the country's richest 10%. Meanwhile, less than 1% is owned by the bottom 50% of households, according to a new German government report on the growing gap between rich and poor. This is the theme of the modern world. Over in Britain, Britons still face real terms wage declines. Here is CPI versus average earnings since 2001. Earnings are the yellow line, so I didn't think it was any need to blow this chart up. You can see it quite clearly. Earnings, when they're floating as they were at the start of the century, above the blue block line, that meant that wages were above inflation, but now they're not. And there's no reason why they will float above inflation for a while longer, unless inflation crashes down, because wages won't be crashing up. Over in Japan, now I've put this in context for the Western world, have got to think about Japan. Japan is just an accident that is happening. Slow motion, but it's happening. And I like the way that Ambrose Evans Pritchard, or at least the editors, have written the headline here. Japan launches QE8 as 20-year slump drags on. And this is basically what we've got for our future. QE3, QE5, QE8, QE12, unless they can do something else. But they will not be able to do anything else, because the entire setup going from 50, 40, 30 years ago has been to do this competitiveness thing. When trouble comes, you do the competitiveness thing. You drive down wages, drive up unemployment until everything gets going again, which is fine over the last 30 years. Generally, when this sort of thing's happened, a recession happens, unemployment goes up, wages go down, the economy then picks up again, and wages pick up again. But they've been picking up again less and less as each recession has hit over the last 20 years. And that's what we've got now. We've got full-scale, globalized world competitiveness, and there is an ongoing world recession. Unemployment is being driven up and wages are being driven down. But the other great driver for the world economy was consumption in the West, production in the East. But with the consumers running out of their ability to consume in the West because wages in the West are being driven down, that machine is broken again as well. So basically what we have is the system that has been developed or had developed itself in a evolutionary sort of way over the last 40 years has got itself into a complete and utter dead end, and there is nothing that can happen to that system that will make it work again, except one thing, and I'll come to that. Otherwise there has to be some sort of a social revolution. Otherwise we are going to get world Japanese grind, and somewhere along the line something will break. Probably currencies will break first. Could be inflation breakouts, but it's going nowhere. The system as it stands at the moment in the global economy is going nowhere. I'll put this in. Arctic experts predict final collapse of sea ice within 4 years. As sea ice shrinks to record lows, Professor Peter Wadhams warns a global disaster is now unfolding in northern latitudes, Arctic. What we have here is either shit or bust. Oh no, that's not, they both sound bad. Anyway, it's either a global disaster because of this global warming as the sea ice, it's one of these self-reinforcing things. As the sea ice goes away, more sea ice will go away because of other things. It just compounds upon itself and could compound upon itself extremely quickly. But that will mean that the drillers will be able to go in and they might find oil up there or other sorts of carbon energy. And it could, if they find enough in a far enough away sort of place, that it could even be shared out among the world equitably. That is literally, in my opinion, the only way the Western world can be saved, or the system can be saved. If up there in the Arctic they stick a straw in and find megamodgy, huge quantities of carbon fuel, preferably oil, and can then just make a little pipeline and pump it all over the world, and everybody becomes very happy again. Otherwise, we are in deep doodah. Bye.